are you seeing land? Do you see, are you converging for the kind of the problem? Have you, or you still need, do you need more time?
I think I need more time.
Okay. Okay.
Trên Philip là cái S, còn Philip là cái trước á, cái tên đúng không? Đúng rồi. Cái bữa nay là Philip cái tên rồi, còn cái tên tại vì nó là một tên, nhưng mà trường nào mà nó chỉ có cái S thì cái độ này mình đi Philip
Chỉ vậy mà sai hay sao? Chứ không đến chiều đến tối.
Okay. Okay, let's give it a try. And let me start with the first part, which is basically just again an indication where to find data and how to look at data. So this is the first problem, and I'm just so this is a link to the so-called annual reports. If you remember my presentation, or here's the website, right? The IMF publishes every year the so-called annual reports on exchange arrangements and exchange restrictions, abbreviation ARE, AER. And this has a long legacy, and you can download that document. The document is pretty fat, right? So it has 4,940 pages. You see that on the right-hand side. And the document is like a review of what happened on foreign exchange markets. So you have all kinds of reports, right? Here you have the classification, by the way. That's the classification of exchange rate regimes, including a definition. Then there's overall developments. Then you have, this is interesting, you have for some countries you have changes and resulting reclassification of exchange rate arrangements. So some countries change their de jure arrangement. Some countries change their de facto arrangement. Now let me check whether Vietnam is in that list. Yes, it is. So it went from, or it basically, the de jure arrangement did not change. The de jure arrangement for Vietnam is managed floating, but the IMF went from, said that in October, Vietnam went from a crawl-like arrangement to a stabilized arrangement, which means basically the de facto exchange rate regime of Vietnam has become somewhat more stable. Assessing, according to the assessment of the IMF, this is the thing that I brought up in my presentation, right? There's these de facto classifications and the de jure. De jure is what the monetary authorities announce. De facto is what they actually do. Now, most emerging markets, this is something very quite interesting, do stabilize the exchange rate, but they do not formally announce it. So the de jure arrangement is more flexible than the de facto one. This is called the fear of floating, and it's actually quite a smart arrangement because you stabilize the exchange rate because you think it's important, but you do not commit to doing it, such that you are not tested by markets. That is something that emerged in the wake of the Asian financial crisis as something that a lot of emerging markets do. Right? So then blah blah blah. Then you have a table where basically countries are classified, and then you have these country pages. So basically, the largest part of the annual reports are these country pages, and it starts from Afghanistan and goes all the way down to Zimbabwe. Now let's look at Thailand. It's 4363. I looked it up. So you have Thailand, and for Thailand you see that the IMF makes the following statement: the de jure and de facto exchange arrangements are classified as floating. So here, the two exchange rate regimes coincide. Now, in these country pages, you find a lot of stuff on international capital flows and regulations. So if you really want to know, I mean, suppose you are responsible for deciding whether you want to put your money into an economy, then you better carefully check these notes, because that gives you information on all kinds of restrictions. Now let's go to Turkey, just as another example. not going to Turkey, we're just going to the page of Turkey. So for Turkey, which is now called Türkiye, because that's the Turkish name, you see that the de jure exchange rate regime is free floating, which would be the central bank doesn't do anything. And then there's a lot of text, and finally you get that statement from July 2022, the exchange rate followed a depreciating trend within 2% band against the US dollar, with one realignment in November 2022. Therefore, the de facto exchange rate arrangement was reclassified to crawl-like from floating. So the IMF took the liberty to say, look folks, what we think you're actually doing is something else. Okay, now, Britain is boring. Well, Britain is not boring, but Britain is, I mean, let's look at the UK 4703. You go to the UK and you get the de jure and de facto exchange rate is a free floating. So the British pound is freely floating against the other currencies in the world. And finally, let's go to Vietnam, because that might be of interest for you as well. So Vietnam, you learn that the currency of Vietnam is the Vietnamese dong. You know that. The de jure exchange arrangement, euro exchange rate arrangement is managed floating. So that's what the State Bank of Vietnam announces. And here you say, therefore, the de facto exchange rate has been reclassified to stabilize from crawl-like effective October 21, 2022. So backward looking, the IMF says, oh, we observed this and that in foreign exchange market. We think that at that time, the State Bank of Vietnam actually stabilized the exchange rate more than what they officially said. Now, the question is, what is this good for? This exposed de facto classification. Well, it's certainly good for all kinds of empirical analysis. Now, this is not the effective exchange rate regime stuff that I presented in Ho Chi Minh City, right? These are the so-called unilateral classifications. But you can imagine a data set that basically gives you the de jure exchange rate regimes of countries and the de facto exchange rate regimes, and tries to figure out whether stabilizing the exchange rate de jure has a positive effect on economic growth, on, for example, price stability, and you can compare it to the effect of de facto classifications. Now the problem with these de facto classifications is it's not forward-looking, right? The IMF never says that's what the central bank is currently doing because they don't know, right? They can only do that ex post. Okay, that's what I wanted to say on the annual reports. And now let's go into this monetary model thing. And I think we can A and B can be quickly done, right? What is the first equation? Money market equation. What's the second equation? Brilliant. Okay. And what's the third equation? UIP. Okay. Now let me spare you the derivation of the nominal exchange rate, because it's good. It's an important exercise. But by the end of the day, what we get is 1 over 1 plus lambda, and then we get that sum s from t towards infinity, lambda over 1 plus lambda, or s minus t, and then we have expectations s of msh minus psf minus phi y sh plus lambda ifs, plus the limit for cap t going towards infinity, lambda over 1 plus lambda, capital T, et plus cap t. And if we exclude speculative bubbles, then we set this equal to 0. Well, what do we set equal to 0? We set the bubble term equal to 0. So there are no speculative values. Again, we assume that this stuff is equal to 0. So we end up with a very simple expression, namely the nominal exchange rate is equal to 1 over 1 plus lambda, s going from t towards infinity, lambda over 1 plus lambda to the power of s minus t, et, MSH. Now, for MSH, we have the following information. Well, we have mt plus 1 h equals mt h plus u h. Now, please note, what's the interpretation of that? Well, it says that mt plus 1h minus mth is uh. This is the growth rate of the money supply. So basically this says that the money supply grows with a constant rate. Good. And now, does anybody want to continue? I provide you with a sufficient number of pens, hopefully some of them working. Yes.
I can solve it, but I have questions. Like, I just concerned about the growth rate of the money supply.
Mm-hmm.
So because it's constant, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we don't need the rational. I mean the capital ET for the MSH.
Yeah. Okay. Good. How do you say that? Well, AT MS equals MS. You know exactly, that's a good point, right? I mean, we should, if you know that something's following a deterministic path, then of course you have perfect foresight, and the realized money supply is actually equal to the expected money supply. So what you get is, you get ET is 1 over 1 plus lambda s equals t towards infinity, lambda over 1 plus lambda s minus t ms. So it's like, someone says you can perfectly predict things. Then it doesn't mean that the expectations matter. The expectations are unimportant, but the expectations coincide with the realization. Thanks for bringing this up. That's a very nice point. It's a subtle one, but it's an important one. Okay. So Joe, you want to do it? Okay, so you take all the. It's very hard to move the lower ones, but.
3 S minus 3, do we have to prove that or we can use it?
Well, I can show it if you want. If you want to prove it, you can prove it. But if you don't, then I can just it's a two-liner.
Can you prove it? So I use this.
Okay, I'll but don't run away.
Yeah.
Right. So you have this, of course, means that mt plus 2 equals mt plus 1h plus mu h, which is mth plus 2 mu h. And you see that mt plus 3 h equals mt plus 2h plus mu h, which is mth plus 3 mu h. And so what you get is basically ms equals mth plus s minus t mu h for s greater than t. So that's the logic.
Then use
Okay, now the floor is yours again. Okay, super. That's yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Super. So, kind of knocking on the table. Good. So that's it. Now you were short on this, but that's perfectly fine. I mean, what you did is, and I guess that everyone knows, but let me just add that what you did here is you said this is just 1 over 1 minus lambda over 1 plus lambda.